Hi everyone. Today with special excitement, I'm pleased to welcome Ram, a very special guest joining us from California to our P4 expert from table series. Ram currently working as a software team lead at Keysight Technologies, and he's a UC Berkeley graduate with degrees in applied mathematics, math, physics, and computer science. And he's a specialist in building network testers and measurement platforms, and is currently leading a team to deliver the industry's high density layer 2, layer 3 testing solutions. And today he will be sharing with us his expert opinion on the future of network testing and his journey of building and delivering a line rate P4-based network tester using Barefoot Tofino ASIC-based appliance. With that, I ask that you give your full attention and hand out the session to Ram.
All right, thank you so much, Praveen. All right, hi, my name is Murthy, as Praveen mentioned, and I'm a software team lead at Keysight Technologies. The purpose of this talk is to explore our experience in building a P4-based network tester and compare that to our existing FPGA-based solutions. Finally, we will take a step back and contextualize our experience and learnings. The agenda for the talk is the following. First, we will focus at a high level on what the definition of a layer 2-3 network tester is. The key question that will be analyzed is if P4 can be leveraged to implement a network tester. After establishing definitions and context, we will explore a common use case as a vehicle for understanding the building blocks of a network tester. With our understanding of the primitives, we will then take a closer look at existing FPGA-based implementations and examine what is possible using P4. Next, we will do a brief comparison of product development in P4 versus FPGA. And finally, we will take a step back to correlate these ideas into a larger picture within test and measurement. Before we dive deep into the topic, let's establish some common understanding of a network tester. First and foremost, the main objective of the tester is to measure and characterize network devices and systems. For instance, an original design manufacturer or network equipment manufacturer will be interested in qualifying the throughput, latency, and forwarding correctness of their devices prior to shipping or releasing a product. Similarly, a network operator may be interested in qualifying the routing correctness of protocols such as BGP or convergence performance such as ECMP with a set of devices ready for deployment. Next, we will pose some critical questions that we faced along the design and development phase. First, can we leverage P4 to make a network tester? Specifically, can we support our customers' typical use cases and performance requirements and create a minimum viable product? Along those lines, can we leverage our existing IP and maintain the same user-facing experience while integrating a completely new data plane technology? Finally, what does it really take to deliver this product to market, and what is the best way to accomplish this? Now that we have a basic understanding of a network tester and our targeted questions, let's explore a concrete use case to identify the basic building blocks for a tester. We'll examine a common test case for network operators to evaluate routing and convergence. In this scenario, the tester will emulate a top-of-rack server as well as a set of top-of-rack switches found in a typical class topology. Specifically, the emulated switches will advertise BGP routes corresponding to downstream servers. The emulated server will then send traffic over those advertised routes to the top-of-rack switch, which will then distribute that traffic using ECMP. The tester will then measure the distribution of the flows prior to and subsequent to a failure event. The tester will also measure the amount of time for convergence to occur after the failure event. Here we will show a recorded demo of this use case using Ixia's UHD-100T32, as well as a set of devices running the open source Sonic network operating system. There we go. At the beginning of the test, we can see that the traffic is distributed equally amongst the 8 top-of-rack switches that are being emulated. We can then see that the tester brings down the link on one of the 8 ports And then we should see that the traffic is redistributed across the 7 remaining links. Here we can see that the traffic has been successfully redistributed across the 7 links. The next step that the tester will do is actually provide the amount of time it took for this convergence to occur. Here we can see that the value measured for convergence was 12.303 milliseconds. This is actually based upon the amount of packets that are lost during the test. Now that we've gone through a concrete use case, what are the primitives that are needed? At a high level, we can clearly see that we need stateful BGP protocol emulation, as well as the ability to precisely generate and analyze the traffic flowing through the system under test. As we can see here in the slides, we need to be able to generate this precise sequence of flows. In addition, we need to be able to provide real-time statistics to the user to be able to provide measurements. Digging a little deeper, we can represent the primitives in a block diagram to understand the pipeline. At a minimum, the tester's pipeline will include the ability to send specific packets at a target rate and instrument those packets as needed to analyze on the receive side. We can take a look at this block diagram and see that we have a basic packet template memory and a scheduler tied to that memory. Packets will then be sent into the egress pipeline and be marked with an identifier and instrumented with the timestamp and signature. Finally, those packets need to be modified per the requirements of the user. In addition, the receive side will then analyze incoming packets and collect metrics associated with the detected flows based on the instrumentation found within the packet. We can see that as well in the diagram as the packets come into the Ingress pipeline. In the Ingress pipeline, we will parse for that signature, and based on a successful hit, we will then give analytics on those flows. Both the Ingress and Egress pipelines will need to provide statistics in a performant way to the software to effectively correlate the real-time stats. Let's start getting into the technical details of the implementation. One of the key primitives highlighted is precise flow generation. Typical FPGA-based products support user-defined fields that can modify a packet at any arbitrary offset. Looking at the 2 screenshots taken from the IX Explorer GUI, we can see some examples of this. One example is this table UDF. The primitives in the table UDF is modifiers at a specific offset along with the data associated with it. Similarly, we have a concept called a value list UDF. This also has a byte offset associated with it and the data associated with it to be put into the packet. This is a challenge in P4, as a primitive doesn't exist in the P4 specification to do this. The more natural API is to use the parser definitions of fields and modify those. However, let's go back to the use case. Is this absolutely necessary? We saw in the use case that the fields that really needed to be modified were the layer 3 source and destination addresses and the layer 4 source and destination ports. With the more limited and natural approach to P4, it's fairly simple to implement the use case. We can see here in this code snippet that we can simply read on a stateful packet counter index and then modify the fields in the packet according to the user's requirements. Again, coming back to the use case, this is what we were looking to generate on the wire, and we can see the P4 equivalent way to implement this. The next block we will examine is the Ingress parsing of the packet signature and instrumentation. In typical FPGA products, the signature can be placed anywhere in the packet. Again, this is difficult in P4. And there's not a clean way to scan the entire packet and the entire payload. However, we can place some additional assumptions that the signature is always after all known headers at the beginning of the payload. This greatly simplifies the problem and allows us to use a match action unit to implement the ternary match for the signature. Coming back to the use case, this is acceptable, as the system under test is not concerned with the payload of the layer 4 packets. As a final block, we will examine statistics collection. In the pipeline, if a packet has a signature matching the program value on the Ingress port, and the pipeline needs to compute statistics such as frame count, byte count, latency, and sequence stats. In addition, to provide the user real-time stats, there needs to be a mechanism to take a snapshot. Typically, in FPGA, we use a freeze pulse to get a snapshot. However, in P4, there is no synchronous mechanism to freeze stats simultaneously. We needed to get clever in our design and accept certain trade-offs in precision compared to FPGA. Now that we've examined some of the implementation details, let's do a compare and contrast in development methodology. The first topic we will look at is the compilation of the data plane. In FPGA, typical build times are 3 to 6 hours for routing and 1.5 hours for synthesis. Furthermore, builds typically use 5 seeds for build strategies to ensure at least one successful build. FPGA developers also need to take into account timing and utilization, which adds further cost to the development process. This is in comparison to P4, which can compile a data plane plus API bindings in 5 minutes. This allows for much quicker iterations on the code, compile, and deploy cycle. Developers can quickly verify their changes with images built on their local PCs, similar to a software development model. This greatly enables an agile development methodology, leveraging sprints for feature development and bug fixing. Next, we will examine APIs on both FPGAs and P4. In FPGA, the RTL developer will provide a design document of their module, which will include a register-level memory map, as well as a high-level procedure to program and manage the module. This document is passed as collateral to the software team to integrate into the application stack and existing abstractions. In P4, the compiler auto-generates the API for the P4 program, which serves as a single source of truth. What's very powerful is that these APIs can be exercised in a variety of ways. For instance, during the initial P4 development phase, these APIs can be used via RPC mechanisms such as gRPC, which enable quick scripting via Python. They can then be integrated into the highly performant application stack using direct C APIs. One of the most compelling features of P4 is that this work can typically be handled by the same developer. This means that a single developer can deliver an end-to-end feature in the data plane. A final consideration in the FPGA versus P4 comparison is the scalability, precision, and accuracy of the implementations. In our typical FPGA products, specifications are determined before a board is even built. For instance, our products can scale in many dimensions, such as number of trackable flows, the number of streams, the number of stateful protocol sessions, and the number of modifiers and the depth of the underlying memories associated with those modifiers. Furthermore, our typical FPGA products leverage years of RTL IP to have extremely precise schedulers, as well as extremely precise latency measurements. This is in contrast to P4, where the scalability of the program is ultimately determined by the resources available in the ASIC. The achievable precision and accuracy is directly related to the precision and accuracy provided by the fixed functions in the ASIC. P4 in and of itself does not make any kinds of guarantees on this in comparison to RTL. However, this is per design, as P4's primary use case is high-level programming of switch fabrics, which does not afford the same flexibility as RTL. Let's now take a step back and give context to our findings. The big question, is P4 the future of network test? In my opinion, the answer is a qualified yes. FPGAs will always be critical to layer 2-3 network testing, in at least 2 domains from my understanding. One domain is the new speeds and feeds as driven by the IEEE and Ethernet consortium, which is ultimately driven by the bandwidth demand of east-west traffic in data centers. Every increase in SerDes signaling will require network testers for ASIC validation. The P4 programmable ASICs will always be available too late in the life cycle of new signaling technology to address this market. I place my bets that the first network tester to market in 800 gig and 1.6 terabit will be FPGA based. Another domain is high scalability verification. P4 programmable ASICs have to compete with standard merchant silicon, where cost is a large determinant for purchasing by data center customers. Because of this, P4 programmable switches will likely always lag in system resources to support these high scalability use cases as standalone devices. However, P4 programmable ASIC plus FPGA hybrid systems have a promising future. Specifically, the economics of such a design are much more appealing than a completely FPGA-based solution, and simultaneously provide immense throughput and flexibility through programmability. In general, P4-enabled systems are a huge boon to the networking industry via its programming paradigm and ecosystem. Another key takeaway is the innovation opened up by P4. The ability to compile the data plane in 5 minutes is revolutionary. The speed of innovation is now the speed of typing and not the speed of your massive build systems. The paradigm of P4 source code as a single source of truth is powerful. By reducing the amount of hands that a feature needs to touch, P4 drastically reduces the effort needed to deliver data plane features end to end. Overall, errors are reduced and turnaround times are shrunk. Furthermore, uniform and simple APIs allow the data plane to be continuously tested via CI/CD pipelines, independently of their integration into existing application stacks. This dramatically de-risks commits to the data plane and reduces overall effort again for product development. Overall, P4 enables testing products to be developed iteratively and rapidly by small, self-contained software teams. These teams can be much more responsive to evolving customer needs through the elimination of cross-functional team dependencies. Now, let's get back to the key questions we asked at the beginning of the presentation. All in all, through our exploratory and product development cycles, we were able to successfully leverage a P4 programmable chip to deliver a viable network tester. We were able to leverage our years of IP to deliver the same user experience while modifying the underlying implementation to a completely new hardware platform. Ironically, the majority of the work and time spent has been in the software domain with integration. From a resource allocation perspective, we were able to rapidly prototype a proof of concept and eventually bootstrap that into a shipping product with a small self-contained team. Overall, leveraging the P4 technology stack allowed us to transform a typical hardware project into a software project. With that shift, we simultaneously saw a shift from waterfall approaches to a truly modern agile development process with CI/CD pipelines across the application stack. This has us well set up to quickly mobilize and meet evolving customer needs. Finally, I'd like to take this opportunity to recognize those that have helped us along this path. First and foremost, I'd like to thank the Keysight UHD team. The entire team drove headfirst into this unknown territory. We collectively rolled up our sleeves and got to work and have delivered immense innovation and value to the market. In addition, I would like to thank the incredible support from the Barefoot engineering and support team through this process. Their help has been invaluable throughout the development process, and this product wouldn't be possible without their support. And last but not least, I'd like to thank the P4 open source community for bootstrapping such an innovative technology. I'm truly excited to see where this journey leads all of us and the innovation that will continue to develop in this community. It's a joy to be along for that journey. If you'd like to get in touch with me, feel free to shoot me an email or connect with me on LinkedIn. Also, if you're interested in Ixia's UHD 100T32, please check out the product website as well. Thank you.
Hey Ram, thanks for delivering such a wonderful talk. And it's great to hear how P4 is transforming the hardware-based projects to software-based project. And yeah, I'm just wondering, for the audience like me with an academic background, could you briefly talk about which segment of the network industry largely benefit from such network testers?
Yeah, sure. So I think when answering this question, it's important to kind of consider the whole life cycle of an Ethernet technology. Like for example, if we start with a new technology, let's say 800 gig or 1.6 terabit, right? the first step in getting that to the data center is having an ASIC available for this, right? And so the first consumers of our products are going to be companies like Barefoot, companies like Broadcom, who are developing ASICs for the larger industry as a whole. And so at that level, you're looking for basic bit blasting, basic throughput testing, and essentially validation of the whole design. The next step as we get into it is in the manufacturing space of white boxes, as well as the space of network equipment manufacturers. They take those ASICs and they put those into their products, right? And those products need to either be tested on the manufacturing line or prior to being released into production.
Right.
Then finally, we get into the data center operators as well as the service providers. So the data center operators and the service providers will take that product, either the white box or the proprietary design, and put that into their network. And prior to putting that into their network, they need to validate that in a pre-deployment scenario. And so we can see within the life cycle of a whole technology, the role that a tester plays in each step. And so that's where I kind of see the value of testers along the pipeline. And specifically, a bug that is caught pre-production is a lot easier to save money on than something found later down the line. We can look at that even at an ASIC level. If we make a mistake there, the cost of that is significant.
Right.
And obviously that translates all the way down the stack.
Right. Excellent. Yeah. So I'm just wondering, could you share some stories on how the network testers, especially from the operator's perspective or the ASIC manufacturer's perspective, are helping the network testers are helping the network operators in their day-to-day operations. Any insights would be helpful. Yeah.
Right. So obviously for these ASICs to go out into the market, we need to be able to validate them, obviously. Any bugs that exist in these ASICs from a forwarding perspective or a throughput perspective leads to issues downstream into our data centers. And, in order to prevent those kinds of issues, we closely work with ASIC manufacturers to be able to validate those designs. Now, coming to the other end of the spectrum with network operators are getting shipments of boxes and transceivers or optics every day, potentially. And those need to be deployed in the data center and validated. And so just at a basic bit blasting level, you can see that they need to test in pre-deployment that these boxes are shipped are actually working. So for example, just in a basic scenario of validating layer 1 transceivers, right, and layer 1 connectivity, we can see a use case there. And we can extrapolate that to a further kind of larger system. As we have these pods that are deployed in the data center, right, we need to be able to validate the connectivity, the routing between these pods, right? And so in pre-deployment scenarios, we typically see our customers testing that before they get deployed into the network. One space that I can see that we don't really touch upon a lot is in actual deployment. And this is something that we're really looking to target with UHD. Typically the factors that kind of prevent that are 1, form factor, and 2, economics. And so with this design, we've kind of embraced the Open Compute Project's modular form factor, as well as the economics of scale. And so we hope that we can get into those markets as well and start to do production testing as well in the network.
Great. So I'm wondering, FPGA-based testers are there for a long time in the market. So what are the main advantages that you see with using P4-based network testers that brings to the table, or FPGA-based implementations that you can think of?
Right. So we kind of briefly touched upon this in the talk itself, but really in my perspective, the big benefit is the feature velocity that is enabled by P4. The whole paradigm of turning a hardware project into a software project. The ability for a feature to be end-to-end developed by a single engineer and then delivered to the market. I think that's really going to be a big enabler for innovation in our industry and for this product specifically. Compared to FPGAs, the amount of development time is definitely greatly reduced, and that's kind of where I see the real value add.
Got it. I see. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. And you also briefly mentioned about the hybrid system, ASIC plus FPGAs have more potential than when each of these are operating in isolation. So can you please elaborate on why do you think so, and what sort of use cases that you think would be there for such hybrid systems?
Right. So again, the question kind of gets down to economics. And the reason for that is obviously with a completely FPGA-based system, you have all the flexibility in the world to deliver features, right? However, a big determinant of success in the market is your per port cost. And so by leveraging P4 programmable ASICs, which are under the pressure of basically delivering high throughput at a low cost, we can leverage that throughput in the system and also leverage the programmability that's necessary for a testing product. For example, a concrete use case that is not achievable in P4 today, but would be achievable in a hybrid system is something like MACsec. Today, we don't have a P4 programmable system that can truly implement MACsec in terms of actually encrypting the entire packet. However, with an FPGA-based system, we can easily conceptualize that the FPGA can implement the MACsec portions similar to like offloading. And we can see that that packet is then delivered into the switch and delivered at a high throughput. And we can leverage kind of the economics of the switch to deliver a very compelling testing product at the right price for our customers.
That's a great use case. Yeah, I can think of too. Yeah, great. And based on your experience in building these P4-based testers, what limitations have you observed in the current P4 ecosystem that you think? And also, if you can, it would be great if you can share some thoughts on where the network community, both industry and academia, you think should focus on in the coming years.
Right. So we kind of touched upon some of those limitations already in the talk. We talked about the inability to access basically byte offsets within the packet. And that's something we typically do a lot of in FPGA. Another thing that we briefly touched upon is just the ability the precision and accuracy of the underlying systems. And this is not necessarily a targeted use case of P4, but as we get further and further along in the testing industry, it's going to be important for us to have that level of precision and scalability. And then kind of something just from a developer's perspective, stateful programming is pretty difficult in P4.
Why do you think so? What's the limitation? Do you see the resource or management? What's the problem?
It's a combination of things. For example, like I have a quote from a P4 developer in our organization who was doing DSPs in the 80s, and he said, doing stateful programming in P4 is much harder than the DSP programming back in the, and it kind of comes back to the lack of feedback and the inability to kind of modify things within the same stage, and the kind of, the pipeline and kind of considerations that are needed for stateful programming. Definitely, especially as a software developer who has never really thought about pipelines necessarily. It was definitely a change of thinking to really develop those and integrate those into a system. So that would be something just from like a pain point as a developer. And then overall as the industry, I mean, I think I look at the openness of ONF and the P4 community, and I think that's going to be a great boon for the industry. We look at the value that SDN is providing and really taking it to the next level, from OpenFlow, and I think you're going to see a lot of innovation be delivered through this P4 community. And overall, I think the guidance that I would have is just keep going. Let's keep going.
Cool, great. I think thanks for delivering such a wonderful talk, and I'm happy that you talked about the FPGAs and in the context of the emerging technologies like protocol independent programmable data planes like P4. Thank you for the talk. Thanks.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
Yeah.